Welcome to GovCon Unscripted, where we dive into the unfiltered stories and strategies from all around the world of government contracting. Join host Chelsea Roberts as she explores how to navigate, thrive, and win in this complex but lucrative industry.
All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to GovCon Unscripted. I'm your host, Chelsea Meggett, CEO of Collaborative Compositions. And today we've got on our show our guest, Alexa Tsui. Alexa, who are you and what do you do?
Hey, Chelsea, thanks for having me on. My name is Alexa Tsui. Thank you for asking about my last name. I appreciate that. I am the Chief Operating Officer of G2X. That basically means that I help build and sell growth platform software. So software as a service. And I don't know if you've seen any of those super fun, like the story of Airbnb or any of those when you're building early stage SaaS and then selling them. It's a whole thing about ARR and all these acronyms that you never heard of before you do it. I'm out there. I'm also the face of the company. I'm in front of industry a lot. But to be honest, in my heart and soul, I'm a BD capture exec. I live and breathe that world. I've got a lot of government friends. I've got a lot of industry friends, and I'm super passionate about the industry.
Passionate about government contracting. That's one thing that we share in common.
Yes, absolutely we do.
So tell us a little bit more about G2X. What is G2X? I know I'm pretty familiar with it, but I think our audience may not be.
Sure. And you know what's funny? I think things that I'm familiar with, I think everybody knows. But I was at Vets last week and I was 45 people in the room. I was like, who has not heard of it? And 30 people raised their hands. I was like, really? I think we need to get out of the DMV. This is crazy.
Yeah.
So G2X is really a platform that we built because having done the BD capture role, and you have to log into this tool, log into this tool, log into this tool, and then you take little pieces of information out of everywhere and try to put it together into a capture plan, and then try to use that capture plan for your step reviews. And honestly, there's a lot that could get lost in translation between logging into the different tools and trying to put all the pieces together. So we wanted to build one tool where you could log in once and get all the information that you need, in fact, more than you need, and then even be able to present your capture plan inside the platform. So that's what G2X is. And every time I log into it, we're building, releasing, growing. And so I'm always asking, has anything changed before I jump on this demo? Have you guys moved everything around? Have you released any new tools? Because that's how fast we're building and putting stuff out. It's pretty great.
That's incredible. I am a BD capture professional from head to toe, and I have experience with all of the tools out there. I would say that I've probably worked in most, if not all of them. And I can absolutely relate with that frustration of going from tool to tool and then putting it into some external format in Word doc or in a presentation. And there's got to be a better way. So I'm curious, what makes G2X different than those tools?
No, I love that you asked this. I just have to say one thing about what you just said is like taking everything out and putting it into an external tool. A lot of those tools are PowerPoint. And I think we're so past PowerPoint. Everybody wants to present from Canva. So if you think about what Canva did for the creative world is what G2X is doing for the BD capture folks. Really? Yeah, because if you think about Canva, right? They were like, wow, the bar is so low, a dead person could crawl over it over here. Like, from like an individual's creativity point of view, creating and presenting and doing all this stuff, they started out with a mission to make it easier for the normal person. And I feel like BD and capture is the same. There's GovWin, right? But you really have to A, know what you're looking for, and B, know how to use the tool, and C, know how to export the data, and then you have to figure out how to translate that into what you're looking for. And also I find GovWin really does put you at the capture level, but there's really no tool out there that will tell you what events you need to be attending, who you need to be talking to at those events, what you need to be talking to about at those events, and then how to translate that into your pipeline, how to take the pipeline, translate it into your capture reviews, and then take your capture reviews and translate that into a win. No platform does A to Z. And so that's where G2X and why G2X I think is different.
is that it's got basically all of the form, function, factors, and features that you need to take a capture plan from BD originally, from having those initial conversations with the teaming partners, all the way into we're making capture plans, we're building out the capture development and building out the opportunity in our pipeline and pushing that across the finish line.
Yeah, and also excitingly, our CTO is not in this industry. He's a prodigy coder. He's 27 years old, super young. And so he lives in Seattle and he's very tech forward, and he also implements AI into things. So not only does it have all the tools, but it's fast, it's agile, it's also beautiful. And it answers the mail for the questions that the BD capture people are like, wow, this is such a beautiful app. I would use it in my free time.
Yeah.
The other tools that we use when we have our choice to use tools, rather than being like, okay, I tried to log into GovCon on my phone and it's stuck in a continuous loop and I don't know what happened to it.
Yeah, mobile interface is not best in a lot of these tools.
Not at all. Because honestly, the people that build these tools are typically not software developers. They're typically not people that are on the front lines of AI, on the front lines of software development. So we have Ron Jones, who's a vibe coder, and we have Danny Lobaton, who's a prodigy coder, and me, BD Capture exec, working together to bring the best of all of those worlds into the BD capture process, which has been so stagnant. And I think that now is the time people are willing to listen.
Absolutely. And having such a changing environment and getting a lot of noise out there. So having the ability to provide something that is functionally beautiful and presents well is entirely different than having a lot of those other kind of pop-up tools that are just one-offs, or we're trying to address the fact that Sam.gov interface sucks, or we're trying to do one thing better than all the rest. But having an A to Z solution is fantastic. And so did that take you to Vets 25 this year? Was that why you went?
Yeah, that was absolutely why I went. And also I was asked to speak about the 3 pivots that businesses should be making now in order for longevity in the space. I have a whole talk track around that. I know. That. And the 3 pivots are not what you might think. One of them might be what you might think, but the other 2 are absolutely not what you're thinking. And then I was also moderating a small business panel with the deputy administrator and his chief for the Veterans Affairs. So it was a good time. I was asked to participate in those 2 ways. So that's why I was down there. But it really was great to talk about G2 Exchange and also the Doge. Did you know that we built a Doge canceled contracts tracker?
Yes, I saw that. I've been living on that for daily updates on what's coming out. That's an incredible tool.
Thank you so much. That was another one of those examples of where we kept hearing that people were building it and charging for it, or building it incorrectly, or just screenshotting things and then trying to sell that. And I was like, oh my God, we need to stop. So Danny, the one in Seattle, this chief technology officer, was like, let's build a new tool. So I was like, okay. It took him like 2 days. It was incredible. He's incredible.
Wow.
So yeah, that's the speed of what we're doing. But yeah, that was why I was at Vets. Vets was incredible from a people attending perspective. But I think there's a lot of talk right now going on about the events business, because I feel like for government contracting, the events piece is a whole business, even outside of everything else.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I have found that conferences are an incredible way to connect with potential customers, to connect with potential teammates, to get yourself out there, to build bigger brands, to get yourself into a position where you're being recognized, and to get out into the world and hear about updates and things that are coming straight from the mouth of the folks that are creating some of this policy change and affecting it. So I'm curious, how was the attendance?
So last year they had 3,000. This year they only had 1,500. But let me tell you why I felt like this was a good thing. Last year was overwhelming.
Okay.
There were so many govies that were being followed around by industry. And I just felt like there was a lot going on at night. So many things going on at night that you couldn't even be a part of everything, because there was this. And so you had to either pick. But this year it was about 1,500, so about half. And that's still a lot for a conference if you think about it.
Yeah,
and there was the govies that did come were super approachable, and they weren't surrounded by entourages or their bodyguards or whatever those people that follow them around. They were real people just hanging out. And I felt like it was a different vibe Everybody was just chill. I didn't see a lot of business suits. I was also moving. That's why I didn't honestly wear that many business suits. But I felt like the formality of it was a little bit lower and people were just being more approaching it from a people first perspective. I know you're the fill in the blank government role. How can you help me kind of
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah. What do you need? How can I help you? Yeah,
It
definitely.
makes me think that maybe rather than the events business just completely dying, it's going to change, I think.
That's an interesting perspective. And I would love to talk more about that. And I would love to dive into your 3 pivots that businesses should be making.
yeah.
That sounds like you struck my interest and my curiosity with that. Can you give us a bit of a sense for what your thoughts are on pivots that businesses should be making and what you gave theirs in terms of presentation?
Sure. The first 2 are completely out of the box. The third one, you're going to be like, yeah, I've heard that. The first one is I think companies should stop trying to prime everything. I think that companies should take a look at the large businesses who are being very successful and fill in the blank DoD, mission, cyber type of companies. And I could name them, but let people do their own homework, right?
Sure.
And actually approach it from a 3-pronged approach. There's supplier diversity channels that they have online that you just log into and register your company. Go onto LinkedIn, find their capture managers and LinkedIn with them and then find out where they're going to be. I see my gal over at Khaki, by the way, that's one of those companies. I saw my gal at Khaki going to Nashville for a conference. If I had Khaki on my list and I wanted to sub to them, I would be right there with her in Nashville hanging out. And she's the capture manager. She's like the exact person I would be looking for. And then the third thing is to hit up their small business person. Have a 3-pronged approach to firing up your subcontracting whole plan and consider it more stable revenue generating line of business. And then G2X published a report where we have all the big businesses and we published their registration portals and got their capture people lined up for you as well.
Handy tool. I love that.
I know, right?
That's nifty. I love me.
Could you do that research on your own? Yes, you could. But
Is it a giant pain in the...
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes, I actually demoed G2X. I pulled the report up and I showed it all. And then I had the analyst with me, our director of research, who's amazing. I had her talk about the report and how she put it together. And it's funny because we do a lot of pipeline reports. We write all kinds of reports. But having her talk like how she did it, what her analytical mind and her brain is thinking and putting all these things together, I think people are like, wow, that's not really a BD or a capture function at all. That's an analyst function. And that's one more level that I think is missing in the BD capture process is like the analyst of, okay, let's follow the money. Let's follow what's actually happening rather than just going to happy hour.
Yeah, bouncing around and bobbing around between, let's see if we can find somebody who's relevant here and hope that they're not already 5 drinks in on their open bar.
But that's what is real fun. I'm just kidding.
Oh, the conversations get much deeper at that level, but...
Then the second pivot is I was interviewing somebody for my podcast, which sounds very similar to your podcast, the title of it. And her name is Kathleen Welsh, and she founded a company called Cognilytica. And they probably 3 and maybe 8, 9 years, longer than you might think. Right. They were doing AI training from a PM level, certifying PMs on how to manage AI projects. Interestingly enough, a couple of years ago, actually last year, her company was purchased by PMI. So as somebody that has had to find key personnel that were PMP certified, right. I got on a call with her and I was like, wait a second. Are you telling me that PMI purchased the only AI certifying body for AI PM project management? She was like, yes. I was like, holy smokes. People need to know this. You know, if you fast forward a few years, maybe even 3, every single statement of work that you see that has a PMP, I think the government's going to do a find and replace ACPMI, which is the AI PMP certification. Wow. So that's pivot number 2. Get your PMs and get your people certified with the new AI PMP certification. That way you're ahead of it rather than being behind that curve. And along those lines, what people are not paying attention to is that OpenAI, Anthropic, those are the 2 leaders. Like people are like, what about Copilot? Who cares about Copilot? Not me, not anybody else. Not right now.
I don't use it.
Exactly. People care about OpenAI and Anthropic for different reasons, but let's just talk about OpenAI for a second.
Sure.
So OpenAI took Alexis Bonnell, who is the chief Air Force Research Lab innovation leader. She's incredible. They just hired her as their first partner manager. What does that tell you as industry? That says OpenAI is going to start a partner program. If I was on the contractor side, I would literally be the first person in her seat right in front of her. Hey, Alexis. Hi, I'm Alexa. How can I be your first small business partner in this entire industry? Let it be me, please.
Wow. So you think that's a shift towards indicating that OpenAI is going to be wrapping themselves more into the federal contracting space and providing more on the federal contracting side of things?
100%. They launched a ChatGPT for government. They have 3 or 4 go-to-market leads for PubSec. They absolutely
Wow.
are gunning for it. In fact, Forum, which is a sister company to G2X. So Forum is the company that has the media. And in fact, they produced my podcast from a post-production standpoint. But Forum just had an event called Disruptive Tech, and OpenAI and Anthropic were there speaking.
Wow.
And they're PubSec leads. They were talking about how they're addressing the government side of things. But I don't think either one of them wanted to WikiLeak the fact that the best way to go to market for a tech company like that, we all know because we deal with technology companies all day long, right?
Sure.
So if you think about ServiceNow or Salesforce or Appian, they have partner programs.
Yeah.
And Microsoft, AWS, partner programs. You get involved in the partner programs and then you co-sell solutions to the government. That's how it works.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of folks didn't realize that OpenAI was already there with their first partner manager. First part was to get your AI PMP. The second part is to get in front of them and start convincing these LLM leaders that your company wants to be an implementation partner.
Interesting. So it'll be more of a partnership standpoint from the perspective of small and mid-sized and probably even large companies that are implementing that on their behalf.
Exactly. Let's just say they want to buy some kind of a software system, USDA. USDA does all the permitting for fishing permits, and they have 16 different permitting applications, and they want to roll it all into one. I didn't just make that up. That was actually a real requirement back in the day. And when you go to orals, if you were bidding on this, rather than showing up with slides, you showed up with an application built, and you built it using OpenAI for government on the front end, Windsurf on the back end, which they also just purchased. And you vibe coded an entire solution and you handed them an MVP at orals. You will smoke the competition, and that's where we're headed.
Interesting. It sounds like that would take a bit of investment, though, on behalf of a company to put that forward. I think the traditional way is we'll have the government pay for the development and we'll wait for them to do the award first. Do you see that shifting?
I do see that shifting. We've been selling imaginary people to the US federal government for so long that I think we're going to have to start selling solutions, finally.
Yeah, I could see that 100%. You're not waiting until you get the award to staff the contract and to put something forward.
Or you have 2 or 3 technologists on your team that are vibe coders, and they take the SOW and they're like, okay, I get why they're trying to do it. The system's not going to plug into everything that they have, but you can absolutely get 70% there with one person that's a vibe coder. Let me just explain that term a little bit because people might not know what that means, even though I think it's one of the hottest terms right now. Vibe coding is when you take an LLM and you take a tool like a software development tool and you plug them in together. You don't have to be a coder. You just have to know a little bit, enough to be dangerous. And you talk to the LLM, let's just say it's ChatGPT. Hey, Chat, I want to build this permitting application where I'm going to be roping 16 applications together for permitting, for hunting, and it needs to do this. And then I tell Windsurf it's plugged into, it also needs to be security compliant with this. And then it's going to start building in ChatGPT. It's going to push it over to Windsurf. It's going to show you what it looks like, and it's going to start coding it for you.
Interesting. That is a whole future leap that I have been anticipating, but I'm not sure I'm prepared for it. That is quite the leap.
Listen, I'm also not a vibe coder. I just can play one on TV. Ron Jones, the CEO of G2X, is one, and so I spend an exorbitant amount of time talking to him about this stuff.
I could go so far and for so long on the
I know.
nuances and intricacies of developing a solution that, or having GPT develop a solution that is developed in a different software and is coded by an LLM. It makes all the questions that come into my brain like, how do you
I
make sure
know.
it's not hallucinating? How do you make sure
How?
it's accurate? How do you make sure
Right.
it's hitting the right points, all of the right
Right.
places? And I
Right.
think getting to the point where you can develop an MVP and put that forward starts that conversation. So it's
Right.
not just starting from scratch and starting with,
Right.
okay, we're still trying to understand the requirements. We're still trying to figure out, what you
Exactly.
need. We've taken our best and we're doing our best shot at
Yep.
providing you with what we envision you needing. Is this right or wrong, or is this on the right track? It's so much more productive to start the conversation with something in hand.
Absolutely. And one of the questions I got during that pivot was, we're a traditional government contractor. How do we move that fast? Because, like you
Yeah.
said, you want to go into orals with your assumptions, maybe your PM,
Yeah.
how you would staff this, and I want you to like me because I'm very likable.
Yeah.
You want to be like that in your orals instead of literally showing up with a solution in hand. How do we move from here to here? How do I get there? And I was like, look, man, you're going to have to do it. I would just say invest. That was exactly the right thing. Invest in the technology, the people. Somebody get a vibe coder on your team and get somebody who understands the government contracting process and how those two things might work together. And that could be the same person. Somebody that get a technologist, a chief technology officer, is somebody that could probably do those things, right? That was my answer to him. My third pivot is gonna be super simple: state and local.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of discussion of if your government contracting, your federal contracting's taken a hit, see if that's going to state and local level or if that's something that's going to be taken forward at the state and local level. And ultimately, I think there's probably going to be a lot of shifts there, but a lot of programs that are in federal that people are using for federal contracting databases and knowledge bases, they don't hit those same points at the state and
Right.
local level. So does G2X?
G2X doesn't track state and local per
No?
se,
Okay.
but G2X is doing a lot around advising the industry to look there because a lot of customers are moving there from there. A lot
Right.
of the government customers that might have been at HHS now are working on the procurement side of state and local. It made sense from follow your customers. And also they buy the same solutions, very similar processes. You have to have your compliance stuff. You have to be registered to do business there. You'll feel like home rather than going out and just being selling commercially, which is always an
Yeah.
option too. But if you go state and local, you can use your past performance with federal. You can pick your place of performance and say you've done work in that state. You
Right.
have this leg up from not starting from scratch. And also,
Definitely.
to be honest with you, some of the state and local procurement execs are awesome. So, Chief Procurement Officer for DC, his name's Derek White. He came from federal. Amazing. The guy for the Chief Procurement Officer for Maryland, amazing. Also came from HHS. You see a lot of these chief procurement officers that really grew up in federal. So instead of making a pivot, it's a slide.
Yes, definitely. And I feel integrating that state and local into your business plan and into your business planning, I think that's just a natural next step for a lot of
Yeah.
companies that they may not have necessarily thought of. But if you skip over that state and local, you're inherently skipping over the places where it's easiest to access for you. You
Right.
can go into your local constituent's office, you can go into your state and local enterprise offices and have conversations as to if you're not in the DC metro area, then you've got a whole trek to get it to your customers to get to the points of contact that you need to engage with. So I would say it's probably a more approachable market for a lot
Absolutely.
of folks than the federal market is overall. If you've made it and if you've done a lot in the federal market, it makes sense to take that and leverage that closer to home, places where you're going to have a more noticeable impact on things that are happening in your daily life and with your community that I think would seems a little bit more collaborative and a little closer to some folks in the community level than what federal can.
100% agree with you. And honestly, if you're in PubSec at all, you are about citizen services. And
Exactly.
you don't get closer than state and local.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's where it is. And then I was gonna also say that G2X is about to put out a report. It'll be later this summer, maybe when this comes out, but it's gonna be a report that lists out every single state, all of their registration database, and then all
Ooh.
their procurement people in one place. You can just figure it out. And people ask me, like, I don't want to start with all 50 states, but how do I pick the top three that I should look at? And I did a whole talk track around, because it was a 75-minute session. I was able to go into it. But I was telling them about looking at some of the big companies that own some of those bigger contracts, like Accenture. And then there's a few state and local specific ones that people don't even know about. But there's so much opportunity to take the relationships that people have on the federal side. The next time you have a meeting with them, just be like, who's your state and local counterpart? Can I get in touch with them? And then that warm handoff would be everything.
Yeah, I think people forget that the large businesses have that state and local side as well, and that they do have counterparts, that there are other people that you can talk to that they can connect you with, and trying to make those connections as opposed to just starting from scratch and going from the dark. And you'll have to let me know when that report comes out. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges for folks, however many procurement processes and portals and systems that they're using between states, they differ so much. It can be overwhelming for folks. Having a consolidated resource like that sounds incredible, and I'm looking forward to seeing that come out.
Absolutely. There's so much information out there that one of the things companies like ours struggle with is how to give people the right information at the right amount to make the decisions that you need to make, and also the pace that people can go. Because I don't mind being like, here's all the stuff, do all the things, and then make all the decisions. But people don't move that fast. They have to really see it, understand it, and then move.
Yes, especially within federal. And I think that's changing a lot as things start to pick up pace with all the shifts and changes that are happening within industry and within government. People are starting to adjust and adapt to going a little bit faster, but it's a hard change to make. And with the pace of technology just absolutely blowing everybody away, it's evolving. It's completely different. It's just amazing. It's incredible how fast things are moving. I can imagine that's one of the biggest struggles, trying to figure out what's the right stuff to provide at the right time in enough quantity to not overwhelm people, but to give them the resources and information they need to go forward.
And then, of course, there are always our competitors out there too that are trying to do what we're doing. And it's funny, people ask me the question you asked me earlier today, is what makes G2X different than fill in the blank 10, 12 other tools on the market? And I think just trying to innovate or die. This is the time that you are innovating or you're dying.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a mantra to live by.
I think so too.
Innovate/adapt or die. And at this point, companies have to face the realities and picking a tool and leveraging the resources that are available to them, not just going after whatever they can come across or whatever is flashiest. Or it's no longer about the most expensive tool either, because there was a long time that we have to have the big flashy, most expensive tool to be able to come to the table and have these conversations. But those are the same tools that are dying on the vine because they can't adapt fast enough, and they're not being developed by people that are familiar enough with the technologies that are coming out that can enable them. So it's a huge shift.
It's shifting, but it's been shifting for a while. So before, somebody sent you an email and it had a GovCon link. And if you didn't have GovCon, you felt such a tool being like, oh, can you just send me the FedBizOps link? Oh my God, I miss FedBizOps so much. I love you, FedBizOps.
Rest in peace. Me too.
I just feel like it's evolved from you had to have GovCon because in the case somebody sent you the GovCon link, then you'd be able to find this opportunity. But now I've never heard somebody say that. And people are so open to replacing tools. I was talking to the small business over at Vets and I was like, how much do you pay for GovCon? And he said 65 grand. And I was like, how many growth people do you have? He said, 4. I was like, there's an opportunity in the market to save a boatload of money and have a tool that works fast and is clean and gives you the data that you need.
I think is probably a great sales tag for G2X is definitely that. God, that is expensive. That is
streamline your growth platform, and that's growth tools. This is what we're going to go to market with when we change our pricing is streamline your growth, streamline your go-to-market tools, because just take them down to one. And then he told me not only has GovCon, he has another tool. And I was like, seriously? This other tool that you bought was built by the same people who built GovCon. What's the point of that?
Replicative tools for doing the same thing. It's the old way of doing
that's giving the
things.
government right? It's giving the government, right?
It is totally. That is absolutely giving such government vibes.
Government vibes, absolutely.
Oh my gosh. So if people want to get in touch, if they want to start utilizing G2X, what do they have to do?
There's a few different options. If you just go to our website, we have a big banner that says 2-week trial. You can try it for free for 2 weeks, see if you like it. And then our lovely and amazing customer success team will reach out and offer a demo so you can even see, because it's set up a little differently than everything else as well. My advice would be to go through that just to see where everything is located. And so that's the way number one. Number two, I have a link on my LinkedIn profile that you can actually book a meeting with me personally. And I welcome those meetings, and I would sit down with you, explain it, show it to you, and then I'll send you to the customer success team for a 2-week trial, whichever way works for you.
I love that. We'll get those links in the show notes for sure, so people can get involved and get more familiar with the tool and the platform and how they can best leverage it. And if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that? Is LinkedIn the best way?
I think so. Yeah, LinkedIn. And then, as I mentioned, there's a link that you can book my calendar on my LinkedIn profile. I think that's a really great way because my calendar is a little wild, and that link will take you directly to where you can find an open spot and slide in there.
Fantastic. And what's the next event that you're going to?
So on Wednesday, I'm going to Aubrey, who has another podcast called Breaking the Standard.
Yep.
She's a senior contracting officer for TSA. I'm going to go to her 5-year birthday party on Wednesday that she's hosting for all of her folks that have been on the show and all of her other friends in the industry. That's the very next one. But Forum is hosting a huge event called the Innovation Awards in the middle towards the end of June. That's going to be incredible. We have some great speakers. Government's going to be there. Industry's going to be there. It's going to be an awesome event. So that's the next big one. But the next small one on Wednesday this week is the 5-year birthday party for Breaking the Standard.
Yes, and Aubrey's been on our show. We love Aubrey.
Awesome.
Yes, she's great episode. I'm sure your episode is going to be just as great and fantastic and hitting end results. So we love to feature badass women in defense and contracting, and love to have the female presence on the show. We definitely appreciate that. And we'll definitely have to get you back on the show as soon as things at G2X come out. I would love to get back on the show as soon as you get that report out during late summer. We'll definitely have to touch base on that. But this has been a fantastic conversation and very informative. We definitely appreciate having you on the show. And again, we'll have to have you back.
Absolutely, Chelsea. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of GovCon Unscripted with your host, Chelsea Roberts. Do you have a GovCon story or need guidance in government contracting? Connect with Chelsea on LinkedIn to be a guest on the show or to enhance your business strategy. Don't forget, your network is your net worth. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your growing GovCon community.